They, when my father was born, was 8 over 4. And they came to Gage in 1970. If I remember correctly, they came from Illinois. Well, that was an opportunity to be their own boss. That was the one thing. My mother was the first baby born in Gage. They came from, in my life, they came from Illinois. I'm sure that's what granddad, he homesteaded 2.5 miles west of the city. I think he came here about 1893. And the pictures I have doesn't give a date. They told me that night. And my sister might have it. I don't know. I'm sure she must have it. I forgot. My granddad was, I guess he was kind of a wanderer. I guess he liked to see new things. Over what was over the next life. And that's how we met. Now, I don't know where they came from, but they lived to the west side of Gage. Well, but really what stuck in my mind, well, I guess because I was kind of wondering my work through all over the country. So my granddad was a trader, and he had a buggy with one horse. He started out with several items, and he'd go and trade. Maybe he'd be going to be one. And he'd come back and sell what he had, and that's what he had to do. They lived, I don't know just how long they lived. How long he lived out. Well, my mother's gone in a one-room hotel. I'm on the boat for a Boston. And later years it was cleaned up. I have one someplace that I have to put. So it shows my mother went through the day on it. Well, they moved in, but here they moved behind. I'd say she probably 3 or 4. And there they were 3 girls and a boy. And then they came back to the in 1980. Because 2 of them. They were close family. They really, evidently, they wasn't nothing all that exciting. They just worked. He farmed there. And Gage, they had a lot of problems with the Cowboys. Had the saloon, had to make 2 saloons from it. Oh, they get a little out of hand when get them to be sold and go. He'd either take them home one time, he'd take them home if they live young. Oh, they never got any person. They just keep there and ride their ponies into the saloon or wherever a door was open, the hotel. Well, then it was a pretty good sized town. Well, the best that I can tell from what there's a fellow here in town that could really do with it, and that's Mr. Jessup. He's here. But he was here when he was a boy. He said how many delivery barns there was, hotels. It was a booming, thriving town. Around 900 population. Down there, of course, had the railroad. And they were down there freighting from here to Arnett and Grand. That's what I understand. That's right. And of course, there was rivalry between Gage and Cottage in the early days.
What do you think called Gage?
Well, I guess once you taste the other things in life, that's what you want, I suppose. The young people, there was nothing here for them. And those that could, they would go in and go to college. And they'd find out that they were something else besides just living in a small town. And they just come back to it within their kids. They just didn't know what Gage was.
Your mother's on this school. Graduated from
No, she was never supposed to go to the she did go.
well, how about you?
Oh, he went to school here. The school here was now is 53. That was the school that time.
What year was it?
They got married in 1914. I'm sure, I don't know, they both 19 years. Yeah, my mother was 6 months older than my mother. More or less. And,
That's the reason you married a lady girl.
not really.
Not really?
But my mother was still going to school when my dad was working for, they worked, the delivery. They were some good.
How was the recently?
he had a buggy with one horse.
Was the top on it?
No, it was just open.
Oh.
Kind of like a one horse drag wagon. I had a picture of it. And when he'd go by, when she was watching, the teacher wasn't looking, he'd wave out the window.
Oh.
So then they got married, and in 5 years after they married, I was married.
And you were born in 1990. It makes you about my age.
I was 66. Two of my dad's brothers went in the war. And unfortunately, they're just like, they're staying in fact, I'm sure that it had in World War II and Chinese separation. They didn't lie. It's one of those things that had to be.
Did the book come back? And was there a big celebration? Do you know? During Gage?
Yes, it was. They come from everywhere. Of course, we had a lot of farm population. I understand it was like that. Yeah, well, I was everything I did. Yeah, it was celebration.
Okay, now you don't remember the first time you had fun, but you remember the first time you got did you lose anybody?
My mother's sister.
Do you remember your mother talking about?
Oh, yeah, they talked about how the neighbors all tried to help each other. They actually, they didn't hide themselves from it. They got right in there and went into other people's homes that had it and tried to help.
Well, there was no mission.
No. It really was.
Did your family, all of them,
My mother had this food. But my dad didn't.
so he spent his time helping neighbors every day.
Whatever he could do.
Okay, I'm sure you remember the 29 when Bradshaw went to work.
Yeah.
How did that affect your family?
Well, we had a leaving 29. I think it was on the farm. That they rented the farm. My dad and my granddad, the time they rented the farm together. And I know at the time, of course, they didn't have any money. There was very little money. The land supported the family. We raised our own hogs and our own chickens, had cows and milk and food for beef. And my mother had a big garden, always canned for the winter. And when wheat harvest came, the first load of wheat was my mother. And we gave her the first load of wheat. She drove the wagon between town.
Where?
And she bought whatever she wanted to buy. That was the first load of wheat.
I never thought to tell my husband.
And then things just started dropping down to near practically nothing. my dad went to work on the jet. And I went into the CT camp.
Do you remember anything that you had to do that? Where did you work?
Well, I can remember that. They had to drive here, well, a lot of time they drive here almost on it to where the work was, right in the back end of the car, and it'd be bitter cold weather. We lived in town at that time.
What kind of work did you do?
He was a carpenter.
And do you know how much you do?
$28 a month.
Well, you know, that helps in those days.
Oh, we got by.
And was there produce off in your house?
Well, we lived in town, and we had a milk cow.
Oh.
And my mother had, well, I think she had half a dozen chickens probably. And we had a garden.
I think that's the way most people got along.
Oh yeah, we had what we called a pound herd. As us boys got bigger, we get the job. They paid us, each person had a cow, they paid us 50 cents a month. And we picked the cow up in the morning after we milk, take them down to the bar place, from the week to pasture. We had about 20 to 25 milk cows. And then in the evening, we go down and get the cows, distribute them back to everybody's lot by their house.
And gave you a lot.
No, yeah. That was what you had to spend. You didn't have it given to you. You went out and you gathered up junk. People threw it in the alleys, aluminum, copper, and brass. Sell it to the junk dealer here. We had one in town.
How you got to spend your money?
How we had our spending money.
How old were you when you had it?
Oh, I was probably 12, 14, something like that.
And your father now, he just did carpenter work on that.
Well, he done whatever they had to be done.
Do you think the WCA was a good thing?
Well, I don't know what we'd have done without it. Same way with the CT camp. If they had something like that today, I don't think we'd have all the problems we have with the young people.
Okay, tell me about the CT camp. Where were you and just give me a whole outline of the CT.
I went in the CT camp at Woodland. And I was in there 6 months. And we done carpenter work.
Is that where you learned to do your carpenter?
Well, I guess it just I just picked it up as I grew up more than anything. And we built where the superintendent's office, the home is there, as you go into Boiling Spring. That's the building we built. One of our big projects. And then we planted hundreds of trees in the park area out there. And
what about those stone buildings?
we laid stone.
Did you have to go and help bring the stones in?
No, they brought them in by truck. They had some old trucks, and then we didn't have any wagons. We were a little more modernized. Just pit good. Then we had to chip the stones to make them fit. Like the ones you just sit down and chip them out.
And they still look good. Were you over there through their 50th anniversary?
Oh, yeah.
I did see you there.
We needed the CT camp? Yeah,
when they had their 50th anniversary?
50th anniversary. Oh, yeah, we were there.
Oh, did you see me? I was there interviewing people. But I didn't see
we
you.
played music there.
Well, while I was there, we didn't get there till about 11 o'clock. And there was some music being played. I've got it on my...
Yeah, we played music, so... Well, then we played again in the afternoon.
Well, I had to leave. I couldn't go in the afternoon. But Glenn... interviewed him. He was a carpenter. And he told me that's where he learned to do carpenter work.
Oh.
And he's made a lot of houses in town after that. He was a carpenter. And that's what he learned was good.
I was there 6 months, and then I wanted to go to Colorado. And they told me if I get out and sign back up again, they'd send me to Colorado. So I did. And they sent me to Buffalo. So it made me mad. I just stayed in Buffalo a year. So overall, I was 18 months at the CC check. Yeah. And I drove an ambulance. That's Buffalo.
That's right. What was your wages?
I started out at 30 a month. And finally got up to, I think I finally was on with 40. Not 40, yeah, 40. At the last 2 years.
How was the living conditions?
Oh, it was just like the Army. You had barracks, and your own bunk bed and locker, and you had mess hall. You had reveille in the morning, retreat. It was run supervision under the Army.
Well, don't you think they had something?
Well, they had to have something. So they had to, I don't know, in that area of time, they were so many young people that and with nothing to do. You were above the age of hunting junk, you felt like it, you know. And
how old were you when you went into school?
I was 7.
Did you get the $30, or did you have to send part of it?
Well, no. The way I done, I got $8, and I had $22 a month put in the Federal Reserve. So when I got out, then they sent me one lump check.
Could you ever take leave and go uptown?
You could go of an evening. They had a truck that would go in at 6:30, I think it was, and would be back at 11 o'clock. And if you wasn't there to catch the truck, you walked. And you wasn't allowed to have cars, but some of us did. I bought a 31 Ford roast from a fellow here in town named Ed Park. I paid $5 down and $5 a month pay.
Do you mind telling me what the cost of the car was at that time?
Well, it seemed a terrible amount. I think around $350.
Oh.
But at $5 a month, it went on and on.
Let's see, what model would it be?
It was a 31 Ford.
31. Well, I bet you were proud of that.
Oh, yeah.
You had a car.
Yeah.
Okay, what would you do when you get uptown?
Oh, you'd go to shows.
Get your girlfriend.
Well, if you had a girlfriend, yeah. Couldn't hardly afford to have a girlfriend. And then on weekend you could come home. You could leave on Friday and have Saturday and Sunday home and have you back on the morning.
That wasn't too bad.
Oh no.
For that time, and it gave you something to do and a little money.
It was an experience that I think everyone who's in there that I've talked to, that it really helped. It never hindered them one bit. It really helped in everything they did. And they had classes. You could take radio, carpenter work, radio, telegraph speed, advanced schooling, several classes. They had an education program. And you could, if you wanted to, you could get in it. I took up calligraphy. I never had an opportunity to use it,
but they did teach them vocations when they got out.
Yes, you just didn't go in there and work on the end of a shovel handle and then come out and feel that's all you knew. The opportunities were there if you wanted to do it.
Well, that's great. Okay, after you got out, what did you do?
Well, I got up and about the time harvest was ready, and I went to up by Canadian, Texas. My aunt and uncle lived up there, and they was working for a fellow. I got a job at harvest up there, and then my sister went with me, and she helped her aunt do the cooking. That's where she learned how to cook. And then came home, and I worked just different things. So I educated my own self as far as reading blueprints and things of that nature.
Okay, let's go back. We skipped your schooling because we got interested in the CC camp. I presume you went to school here at Gage.
I went to school my dad was on the railroad. I went to 9 different schools in 1 year, all the way from Winoka, Oklahoma to Voyage City and into Canyon, Texas, I believe.
Well,
and wherever they went, he was on a what they call a house gang. They repaired the depots and the bunkhouses and whatever, and wherever they sent the gang was where we went. But all the time we was on there, we was never stationed at Gage.
well,
Shattuck or Fargo, but never at Gage.
well. And then where did you graduate?
I didn't graduate.
You didn't graduate.
I quit in my junior year of high school.
So many young boys in that day and age did. I wonder why. Was it the time?
I really don't know about all of them. For my part, I wasn't interested in school.
Oh, you weren't.
I was more interested in what was going on outside the school. And that's the wrong thing to do.
You were probably sitting in the school looking out the window, daydreaming, wondering what was going on
Yeah.
outside.
And I wouldn't recommend it.
All right. Then let's go on back to your first job, permanent job, after you got out of season.
Well, I guess the first permanent job was when the war broke out in World War II.
Oh, you were in that. All right, before we get into that, let's talk about, or maybe you weren't here during the dirt storm days.
Oh, yeah.
You weren't.
We lived a block and a half east of the post office in Gage. And when the first one hit, my wife's cousin, Lloyd Scott, and I and my uncle, Harry McConaughey, we were fishing down on the Dowden place, which is just to the west side of town. And we seen this cloud coming up, and we couldn't imagine what it was. And we decided we'd better get to the car, which was parked about 4 blocks. And we got just as we got to the car where the storm hit, and you couldn't see your hand in front of your face.
Was that the Black Sunday?
And so we started going to where my aunt lived at the north end of town. And I was on one side of the car, and Lloyd was on the other side. And we'd start feeling our steps going down in the bar ditch, and we'd holler at my uncle to turn it the other way. And I really don't know how long it took us to get to my aunt's house. We made it in that storm. And my mother was about to go crazy because we wasn't there and wondering where we was at. Well, we was in some place, where we was protected. But
How long did that storm last?
Seemed like forever, but I don't know how long it was.
That's the way it seemed to me. I've been asked that question. Honestly, can't tell them. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face.
That's right. Finally, it lightened up that you could see in the house, but the house was just full of fine dust. and you try to breathe, and you just had to get a wet cloth put over your face, breathe, and then that would plug up too. It's very hard to describe unless you wasn't there.
I've been told that when people would talk, it sounded like you had your head down in a barrel.
Yep. It's kind of a roaring too.
Kind of a vacuum or something in there. Your voices didn't sound like it. Did you notice that?
Yes.
Well, what do you think? What do you think made it that way? Too much dust in the air? Static?
Well, I really couldn't say.
Yeah, dust storms. Your father, what kind of work was he doing during the dust storm days? Because he'd have to be out in it probably, wouldn't he?
Well, they was trying to farm, and of course, I think the WPA work was still going on, and he was in that, and that's when around that time is when they killed the cattle.
Oh yes, tell me about that.
And I think they got $1 a head for the cattle, and they killed them. And
who authorized them to kill them?
Well, the government.
Why?
Well, they had an abundance of cattle, and nothing to feed them, and they thought if they could cut it down, that eventually the pasture land would come back. It's kind of on the soil conservation, and they sell them for, I think they got $1 a head, and then they give you the meat, if you wanted it, and you could can it, which my folks did, and everyone else around here did too. Canned the meat in quart jars.
Then it wasn't a complete waste.
No, it wasn't complete waste. And then I think they sold probably the hides seemed like for 10 cents a piece or something. Which now it sounds that's unbelievable, but that was money that they didn't have.
And 10 cents bought a lot of.
10
what
cents?
would 10 cents buy?
Oh land, it'd probably buy. I'd say it'd probably buy 5 pounds of sugar.
And how much coffee?
It might probably buy about a half pound of coffee. But there was so much that 10 cents could buy.
Yes. Do you think that Roosevelt made us a good president at that time?
I do.
You think he was right then in setting up these programs?
Well, we had nothing when he started, and they did have something when he finished.
Yes.
So.
Okay, I think your wife told us something about the railroad, so we'll go back and pick that up.
Well, my dad was on this house gang, and we lived we had a boxcar, that was our home. We didn't have a home other than that. And my mother had it fixed up real nice. Had curtains and well, it was just like your modern trailer houses are today.
Yes.
And
would it be sitting on the sideline?
Yeah, it would be sitting on tracks on the siding. They had special places that they parked them. And then she cooked for around 12 to 14 men, 3 meals a day, and had a wood stove, had a cook car, and in this cook car was a big wood stove, and had a long table, and it'd be from 12 to 14 men, 3 meals a day. And my mother and dad had to buy the food, and then the men paid her 35 cents a meal.
And she served it family style.
Served it family style. And they had a big walk-in refrigerator, and this walk-in refrigerator would hold about 12 300-pound cakes of ice.
Wow.
And they get this from an ice plant, like at Winoka was an ice plant. And they put it on a little push car, and then they would put ropes around it and pull it up to the top of the living car and let it down through big trap doors into this refrigerator.
That's interesting, isn't it?
And all the men, when they get ready to get the ice, all the men went and helped get the ice. They went down to the ice house, loaded it up, and brought it up here, and put it in the refrigerator.
And then when he'd be moved, would both of these cars be moved?
All the cars would be moved, and they had cars like flat cars that had all the material on them and ladders and everything. And we had a 26 model Chevrolet, and we would drive then. And the men, a lot of the men, didn't have any cars, and they rode in their living car, in their bunk cars. They just rode in their own bunk cars. From one
And
place
they would
to another.
move this car you folks would be living in too, with the
Yeah,
train?
they all moved the whole car. They had like, we had our living car and a cook car and a water car and 3 bunk cars and then material cars. Maybe about 11 or 12 cars they'd put on a train and move it to the next town or wherever they're going to send them.
But personally, you'd ride in your own car to the next...
Oh yeah, in our own automobile.
How long did this last?
Oh, I think it was about 3 or 4 years.
And they would go from town to town?
They go from town to town, working on depots, bunk houses, section foreman's home. Each section foreman had his own home, and then they had bunk houses for the men to stay in. And they had white men, Mexicans. Now all of the men that was on the gang my dad was on was all white men.
These men, I expect, had a great respect for your mother.
Oh yeah.
Thought she was a wonderful cook. And
And too, if they had a torn shirt or something like that, well, they'd bring it up and she'd fix it.
yes,
And
they kind of looked upon her as a
yeah.
big sister or something like that. Well, that's wonderful. And they probably liked her very, very much and
Oh, yeah.
respected her. Maybe that's the reason that you weren't interested in school. You had to change schools. And every change would be different, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, you met
You
jillion
have
kids.
to have to make different friends and new
Yeah.
friends. Probably. Okay. Florence, can you think of anything else we missed?
Well, the only thing is, if you're interested, we lived in a living car too on the railroad.
Oh, you did?
10 years.
You worked on the railroad after you were married.
Yeah.
When were you married, and who did you marry?
I married Florence Shelton from Arnett,
Huh?
and 43 years ago, this 27th of this month, September,
1942.
1942.
You've been married 40
Be 43 years.
years. Okay. And then that would be in what year? Would be
42.
42. Okay. Where did you live first when you were married?
We lived in a little 2-room house, wasn't it? 2-room. I was thinking 2-room house in the east part of town, the east of the post office.
East of Gage here.
East of the post office there, about three blocks down, I believe.
And what did you do at that time?
Well, by the time we got married, we were building the airport. out here.
This airport
Right
out
here.
west here.
And I run a packing machine.
Was that built in 42?
They were building it at that time. We started it in, right at the first of 42 when it started. In that, well, I'd say in April of 42, in that area.
How come you got that airport, and who gave you the authority to build this airport? Tell me about
Well,
it.
the best I can remember is the government, it was by the government, and it was for landing of military planes back and forth as they trained out of Woodward at that time. and they'd land out here and use that for landing. And it was an ideal place for training, for them to come in and land and take off, because of the visibility of no trees in that area to speak of at all.
And so few planes at that time.
Right.
Then it was built primarily by the military.
Well, it's financed by the government.
Yes. Okay, and how long did it take you to finish that?
Well, I was called in the service, and they were still working on it when I left. And I don't remember when it was finished.
You weren't here
No.
when it was finished?
I wasn't here when it was finished.
When were you called into the service? What date do you remember?
I went in
42,
43, wasn't it?
42.
42, yeah. Went in November of 42.
What, the Army? Or what
I went in the
division?
Army.
And where did you get your training?
At camp just had it the other day.
Mateo?
Camp McQuaid. It's in California.
Oh, they sent you out there.
Simmons, California.
You don't remember the camp?
I can't call the name of it right now.
Well, maybe we'll. Okay, tell me, give me a description of your camp and what, and a day's activity.
Well, it was just a bunch of buildings, barracks, and we was in the armored division, and we trained on 155 millimeter guns, and well, yeah, it's just hard to say. You just got up and you done what you're told to do, trained, you marched, you drilled, and
learned to salute.
you learn to salute and learn how to take orders. And they had some schooling, different types of schooling you could go to. And then you had to be in bed at a certain time. And Lava Crown gets you up at 2 o'clock in the morning and have to put on a 40-pound field pack and maybe march 15 miles and then get something to eat and then come back.
March back.
March back. Any of those that's ever been in the service or heard about it, they know what it's like.
Yes, but you see, we don't, and that's what we're wanting. We want to know, because the reason we're doing this, the young people nowadays doesn't have any idea what the past was like, and this is one way we're saving history for them. Okay, then when you got through with your boot training, where were you sent?
Oh, I went to Camp Hahn, California. Then from there we went to Camp Gruber, Oklahoma.
And what did they have different trainings for you at these different camps?
Oh, you just was in a routine. You was assigned to certain things. I was a driver for officers.
Oh.
And then they sent us to Camp Gruber, Oklahoma, and then from there we went to Fort Meade, Maryland, and we took advanced training in amphibious boats and jeeps. And,
they had different phases of it
yeah.
in each camp for you to learn.
And then from there I went to, landed at Lahore, France, and got on a troop train and went to Bonn, Germany, and then into Antwerp, into Belgium, and then the war was over with. Then I was stationed at Saarbrücken, Germany.
You never were in any battles there?
No, I was always just that far behind. And,
well, that made you happy.
I was over there, I was in the 7th Army headquarters.
Yes. Who was the general of that division?
Well, we was under Eisenhower, who we was under.
Oh, you were under Eisenhower.
And we was in 7th Army headquarters. And then after the war was over with, my job was, I was a photographer for the war crimes
branch of the service.
Mhm.
And that job was to go and they go to where American flower had been shot down,
Mhm.
and then we'd have them to dig up the body and they'd have an autopsy and determine if he'd been killed by shot with a pistol or rifle, or if he'd been flak from the enemy aircraft.
Mhm. And you took pictures of the
And
body.
my job was to take pictures of all the procedures as they done the autopsies and all that.
Then you would have to watch them do the autopsy.
Yeah.
That wasn't very pleasant, was it?
Not at first.
Until you got used to it.
Then you got used to it.
How long were you in that position?
I believe it was about 11 months.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was about 11 months. And then I came home,
Mm-hmm.
and I was discharged at Camp Chapter, Arkansas.
Did you find anybody's people that you might have known?
You mean the bodies?
Yes.
No.
You didn't know any
No.
of them. Do you remember the name of the ship that you went over on?
No, I don't.
Or the ship that you came back? How did you enjoy the ocean voyage coming home?
Well, it was terrible. It was, from the time we left, every human on the ship was seasick. It was a terrible storm. Far cry from when we went over. When we went over, it was like sailing in the water. It was just like a mirror.
Mm-hmm.
We had ping pong games. We played music. They had boxing matches and everything on deck.
Mm-hmm.
But coming back, they wouldn't let you go out on deck. Only when you went to eat, because it was so rough.
Mm-hmm. And you were sick too.
Oh yeah. I didn't miss a meal, but I was sick.
Where did you land when you got home?
In New York.
In New York. Mm-hmm. And then what? They put you on a train, did they, and send you to?
Well, they had to let us get cleaned up and everything, and then they fed us whatever you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Steak, milk, and the things you didn't have, that you hadn't had, you know.
Mm-hmm.
All the ice cream and things like that.
What was a GI ration like?
Well, we had good food.
Oh, you did?
We had good food.
Mm-hmm.
Now, during the fellows that are doing it on the front and all that, they didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they had their GI ration deals and all that, but I was always just enough behind everything that I didn't. Oh, I had GI rations once or twice, but that's all.
And where did you get your discharge?
At Camp Chaffee, Arkansas.
Then you were free man to go home.
Yeah. Took a taxi all the way.
So you could get there quicker, huh?
There was Max Sloan from here. He got discharged the same day I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I got discharged about an hour before he did, so I waited for him. And we came home together.
Well, that was nice.
And there was 5 of us left Camp Chaffee at the same time, and took a taxi and distributed them out as they come along. 2 of them I think to Oklahoma City, and one down here at Kingfisher, and then Max and I came on home.
Was there a big celebration in Gage when the war ended? Do you remember, Florence?
I don't remember a celebration. And I was at Arnett at the
Oh,
time.
you
I was
were.
staying down there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember any.
And Arnett didn't have a celebration, or
I don't
anything.
remember one.
Well, okay, then you were back and you and your wife were happy together. What did you do then?
Well, I done jobs whatever I could get, and then let's see, I got out in '46, and
When did you get this job on the railroad that Florence was telling me about?
I went to work on the railroad in '51, and I worked 3 years and was cut, what they call the job. I was cut off, bumped, And then I went back later and was on for, overall I was on 20 years.
Oh. And tell me about this boxcar that you and your wife lived in.
Well, we had a living car that was like a coach, like the regular old coaches. And we had it fixed up too. We had had our bath, and had a kitchen, front room, and bedroom, and she made the drapes like these, similar to these, for for it. And then in the back I had in my office, and she had her place where she had her sewing machine. She sewed for the public during the week, and then bring them home and distribute them out over the weekend.
Well, so you were both busy.
Yes.
And happy.
Yep.
When you got bumped, what did you do then? What kind of work did you have?
Well, I built houses, done carpenter work and built houses. I worked for Lee Wilson at Woodward off and on for several years.
And then you got back on your work. You told me you worked on the bridge, didn't you?
Well, I was in the bridge. I was on a bridge gang all the time. I was on the railroad.
You worked 20 years.
Yeah.
Tell me about your bridge work and how they put these big, heavy concrete. You know, when I went through Fort Supply the other day, those great big, huge stringers, is that what you call them? Concrete. They looked like they were a mile long.
Yeah, they're
How long
they
are
are 28 feet long.
28.
And the ones we had, they weighed approximately 50 ton, and they put them in there with a big crane. And
Well, first you'd have to build what do they call that?
Well, we built the columns. They call them columns. And these columns are 28 feet apart. Well, and in the center, then you go from the inside measurement out to the center of the next column. And then you have approximately 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch clearance in between the two. And you set in the next one. And you set them on across. And they're all the same length. These stringers are the same length. And sometimes you have to make the bridge 8 feet longer than it originally was, or maybe you make it 8 feet shorter. It all depends.
Now, is that all what holds these stringers on those columns?
That's all.
Is the weight of
Is
the
the weight.
stringer?
They have a pad. They have rubber pads, and these rubber pads are glued to the column. And then they put the glue on the top, and then they set the stringer on top of that. And then after it's set, when it is glued, the glue won't break. Something else will break, but the glue won't.
And why did they leave them a 1/2 inch apart or 3/4?
That was to allow for the weather, the heat, expansion and shrinkage. If you had them right together, then they'd break in the middle, or something would have to give.
What about when the trains would go over them? That wouldn't bother them?
Well, they give, but what really gives when the train goes over, these stringers are made in a concave shape, like they're higher in the center than on the ends.
I noticed that.
And when the train hits it, they go down, and that's where you get the flexibility of it. That if it hit it all at once, in a very short time it would just start crumbling and cracking, and then it'd give way.
Well, that's interesting. And how many bridges, any big bridges along this Santa Fe that you worked on?
Oh, well, between here, well, I helped build every concrete bridge that's been built between Winoka and Amarillo.
Well.
And right now I couldn't tell you how many there are, but it would run about 3.5 months to build one. Time we'd start driving steel piling, and until we had the train run across the new bridge.
There's no quicksand out in this part of the country?
Oh, you have some.
Oh, you do?
Not very much, but you have some. But you drive your piling down to hard rock.
Oh, approximately about how deep? On some
Well,
places?
it varies all the way from 17 feet down to probably 30
Oh, that deep.
to 32 feet.
Mhm.
But actually, lots of time you don't get down to rock. People have the idea the piling has to set on a hard substance. But what holds the piling, the bridge up, is the friction on the sides of the piling.
Well,
The further you go down in, the harder the ground becomes because you're pounding. And then the friction on the side is what eventually stops you, that you can't drive the piling down anymore.
I see. Well, when you drive that piling down, you're pushing down soil or
Mhm.
sand or something.
You push down a cone shape, it'll start at the bottom of the piling, it'll be just as big around as the piling, but down in there, it'll just go to a point, just like a spear.
Mhm.
And when it gets down so far down, it can't spread out anymore.
Mhm.
And
Well, these pilings then aren't square across at the bottom.
not necessarily.
Mhm.
They may be, this piling that you set, ordinarily they have 4 pilings to a column, to
Mhm.
one column. And they may vary in depth. If you could see underneath, in the ground, they may be just sitting there like, one may be down 15 feet, another down 17 feet. It varies with the ground.
Mhm. Mhm. I can see that. What was the biggest bridge you built?
That one that went up over here by Moreland is the biggest.
East of Woodruff.
Yes, it's 10, let's see, no, it's 19, I believe it is, 19 spans long.
That'd be about how many feet?
Well, it's 19 times 28. I forget just the length of that, of the bridge.
Mhm.
But,
We need our calculators, don't we? Okay. Did you have any accidents at any of these places?
No, well, not all that serious. We had one where, well, when I was on the bridge gang, I got knocked off the bridge by a piling. That I was working what they call in the leads, standing on the platform up on the piling, on the pile driver.
Mhm.
And the piling come in and hit me in the side and knocked me off of the piling down into about 20 foot into the creek bed. There wasn't any water. And I was off for about 4 months, I guess it was, from that.
You were injured then?
Mhm.
Mhm.
But that was the only time that, I got hit in the head several times with different objects, but never lost any time from it, from work.
Mhm.
And,
What was your special job on that?
my what?
Your specialty in working with the bridge crew? What
Well, I
your
was,
job?
in the last 10 years, I was foreman.
Mhm.
Before that, I was one of the head carpenters. And I learned how to read blueprints.
Mhm.
And then I became foreman, and I was responsible for the men, the equipment, the bridge, and everything that goes with it.
Mhm. Well, that was quite a big responsibility.
Yes, it is.
And did you retire from choice?
Well, I had a heart attack and a stroke a little over 2 years ago.
Oh, you did?
And
When did you quit?
well, it's
Retired?
a year ago this last February.
Oh, you worked up till then?
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I decided that it was just time for me to quit and let somebody else do it.
Mhm. Were you the type to worry about your men, whether they were going to get hurt or?
Oh,
worry
yeah,
about your
I
job?
looked after them all the time.
Mhm.
And I seen they doing something I thought was unsafe. Why, we just stop the work and have a little talk about it and get that straightened out.
Mhm.
And rather than wait till the next Monday, every Monday we had a safety meeting every
Yes.
Monday morning.
Mhm.
And rather than wait for a week for a safety meeting, well, we just stop and talk about it then. And I think if you are concerned about yourself and the people that's working for you, I don't think you have many accidents.
And did you live in this living quarters on the boxcar all this time?
All 5 days a week. On Friday, we got off at 11:30 in the morning, and we'd come home and try to remodel our house, and then go back on Sunday. Sometimes we drove. Well, we worked at Shattuck or Fargo or Woodward. A lot of times my wife would just stay home and do her work here, and I'd drive back and forth. We traveled as far as Winoka and as far as Texaco, New Mexico.
And your wife enjoyed that kind of
She
work
did.
too and living.
She met a lot of people, seen a lot of
good
things
friends.
that she wouldn't have seen otherwise.
That sounds like a very interesting life. Really does. Florence, can you remember anything that he hasn't told?
Well, like what?
Anything interesting?
Well, not really. He's done a pretty good job of filling you in.
Well, I've certainly enjoyed this.
Well, I have too, really.
Well, I'm glad. I think, can you think of anything more? Because now we are doing this for the future generations, for your grandchildren. They can go down to Oklahoma City 50 years from now and hear Granddad's voice telling it as it was.
I can't think of anything really. No.
Well, I sure thank you. It's been a pleasure for me.
Thank you.